Welcome, Wargamers, to the foreboding woods of Elpis in the Legacy of Atmos universe, because today we are talking all about one of the coolest things about the setting, and that is the Kryalus. It's an arcane resource of incredible power and significance within the Legacy of Atmos setting. We're going to talk today about what it is, where you can find it on most creatures, and why it is such a meaningful resource to the ongoing narrative set in this game. But one thing I'd like to add right up top here before we dig in completely, if you like this video and you're interested in Legacy of Atmos, please consider signing up for our newsletter down below, as well as getting into our Discord. The reason I offer that is because if you do, not only can you beta and playtest the game, but also you'll be given some free STL files so you can start printing some incredible miniatures that have a lot to do with the Kryalus specifically, of course, as soon as you join in. So go ahead, give that a watch and a click. The description below will have all the links that you need for that. Now, for those of you who are new to the Legacy of Atmos setting and game, you might notice by looking at some of the art or the miniatures that some creatures, specifically the Telus commune, the woodland folk, have these really cool looking crystals growing out of them. They're like kind of all over the place, kind of tucked away in little details and nooks and crannies on the miniatures. Well, those crystals are essentially the topic of today's video. Each and every single living being on Elpis, the planet where all this takes place, has some form of these crystals. Some are displayed prominently, like the Kryalus wolf, which has huge crystal formations all the way down its spine. However, some are very, very well hidden, being more internal than external, and we're going to talk about that more in a little bit. But before we get too far into who has them and where they're at, what is the Kryalus crystal? Well, it's a physical vessel for the animus of the creature it grows in. For every beast on the planet, all of their wild ferocity, their curious tendencies, their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, their personalities, for all the creatures on Elpis can be found in their respective Kryalus crystals. To be short, it's the soul. And it's easy, to look at creatures that have these big, weird rock formations growing out of them and say, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? That's kind of where the life force is stored in these things. But what about, mankind? Do they have a Kryalus crystal? And the answer is, yes, they do. As I said before, some are way harder to find than others, like being internal in the body rather than external, protruding out like the wolf. As of the current timeline that we as, players in this game and readers of the lore and explorers are finding out, the Kryalus of humans is just now being discovered, and it's located right where the skull meets the spine. These early explorations of the human body have pretty much kind of had this hypothesis that maybe what makes humans unique from other monsters or beasts or creatures on the planet is that our Kryalus stone is so closely linked to our brainstem and our spinal cord. And I say theorize because remember, this game has steampunk, vibes to it, right? It's got a strong Victorian era themes, and in our world, the Victorian era is the time period where we formally mapped out the human body. Think like Grey's Anatomy or some of those other, kind of creepy, macabre, works of medical documentation that actually launched science quite a long ways. But you then create this kind of class, based knowledge where only the most learned doctors and scholars and aristocracy or anyone in power would know that A, we have a Kryalus, and secondly, where it's located at. So that's kind of a hidden knowledge at this point, not because anyone is conspiring to keep it secret, but just the common person does not know. But there's more going on than say just, a rock formation that gives some energy within us. It's not just a soul gem, it's also a source of incredible power. As mankind flourished under the growth of the Atmos Federation when they got unified as a kind of one powerhouse, there was a renaissance of science and technology. One field of study, of course, was trying to understand the natural world around them, just like it was in that same time period in our world. All of these fantastic creatures have these crystals growing out of them. What are they? And so it was roughly 25 years from the current timeline where an incredible discovery was made. That animus that resides in every Kryalus crystal is also a source of potential energy. The first rough experiments determined that this energy could be harnessed, but it was extremely limited. You and I in high school would do like the potato thing where you plug two wires into a potato and it lights up a light bulb, where it's like cool, but there's not a lot of practical applications for potato power. Kind of the same thing here. Let's say you grab that Kryalus from the wolf. Sure, you can power, your light bulb, again, just an example, but that energy will run out fairly fast, and once it's gone, it's gone. So even though humanity understood that there was some potential to this new power source, it was extremely limited at the time. And many creatures, from insects to small game like rabbits and that kind of stuff, they just weren't even valuable or powerful enough to do that. Their Kryalus crystals amounted to really no power whatsoever. However, all of this changed with the advent of astromancy. Now, I'm going to do a dedicated video on the topic of astromancy. It's an arcane science, but in short, humanity found yet one more way to create low amounts of energy. This time through channeling the natural power that plays across the heavens, which is directly affected by the constellations. To give you like a real world kind of example of this, we have solar power, right? Energy that comes from the sky. What if we fabricated ways to harness solar power from other suns as well, right? However minute that power may be because they're so far away. Well, at that point, the position of the stars and the constellations would actually give us different levels of energy depending on what stars we could see. And again, can't stress enough, this is a dramatic oversimplification, but you get the idea. It's just there is energy up in the sky all around us, and being able to channel that in some meaningful way. These two divergent sciences, right, these different fields of research finally met, and humanity would never be the same, because it was discovered that the celestial power of astromancy could be funneled and siphoned and ultimately stored inside a Kryalus crystal, essentially turning it into a reusable battery, limited only by the power of the cosmos and the number of Kryalus crystals available. And once mankind had the literal power of reusable batteries, there was a massive technological gold rush. This would be equivalent to the industrial age here in our world, where there's all kinds of new types of industry that simply didn't exist before. You have different kinds of power and weapons and engineering. All of those sciences were birthed at this moment. And while I'll go into more of these uses in separate videos, as far as like what you and I see on the game table, this is how we have marvels like steam-powered technology, because instead of coal being the source of energy, now it's the Kryalus. It's also how we get energy weapons, man-made spell casting, which is essentially wizards carrying around charged Kryalus stones and then pointing them at the enemy and using it as a spell, all the way up to mechanical marvels like the Skirmish. However, like any technological boom, there is always a darker side to it, because the greed and ambition of humanity started to begin to outpace their ability to collect Kryalus crystals. There will be a play-by-play in the future, but the intense desire to claim as many crystals as possible was very much one of the reasons for the Telus Crusade, the large military engagement that is sort of like the center of the story ongoing narrative right now. All of the scientists and engineers and barons of industry are putting a lot of pressure on people to go into the Telus forest and kind of rip all the crystals out of it, harvesting them, mining them, and creating a technological empire. And this is, of course, at odds with the natural balance of the Telus commune, which is the tree folk and the Kareth tribes that live within the forest. It's largely kept, kind of to hushed tones, but House Vaughn of the Regalis Nakani religion is extremely focused on pushing the borders of human technology, and they specifically wanted the Telus Crusade to begin. They wanted their war machine to start churning, hoping that an excursion into the woods could see them collect whole vaults worth of Kryalus stone, or even discover new forms of it from the creatures of Elpis. Now I'm going to end this video like I love to end all of my videos, by simply talking about why I find this such an interesting topic. Right? Simply put, why is this cool? Why should you care? Like in real life, each discovery is only as valuable as the others that support it. We needed astromancy for the Kryalus crystals to have value. And I like it when fantasy mimics life in that way, where, we can create electricity, but if we don't have a good enough battery, we can't take that electricity to do X thing. And this is that same thing where competing branches of thought and research merge together to create new sciences, new concepts, ideas, and paradigms that simply didn't exist before. One thing I didn't touch on too much because I want to kind of save this video as we go into some of the darker tones that exist within Legacy of Atmos is the use of the human Kryalus has been discovered by that elite class, which has a whole myriad of really questionable implications that we're going to talk about another day. And the ramifications of this are huge because it turns every living being on the planet into a direct and tangible resource. You know, whether or not you can use the Kryalus Crystals from smaller animals and small game, that kind of stuff, it's irrelevant. Anytime you see a forest where you know there's a natural environment of predators and prey and a food chain, you know that there is an untapped potential energy source. And so you have to face the greed and the consumption of mankind as they go in and destroy these environments, again, for power, energy, technology. And as we will learn later on, harvesting or over-harvesting can have some dramatic impacts on the planet. But more than anything, including the Kryalus Crystals into the setting really just sets us up for a lot of great storytelling. It portrays the wealth and knowledge disparity that humanity seems to be putting itself through, where only the upper echelon understands this. It seems like, witchcraft and wizardry, but really it's just technology that, quite honestly, even the people doing it don't fully comprehend. They know it's working, but they don't know, the origin of the Kryalus. They don't understand astromancy as much as they want to, but they understand to put these pieces together to create something. And anytime you have the haves and the have-nots and, information restricted by class and social status mixed with very questionable moral, decision-making, you have a recipe for a fantastic narrative, a fantastic storytelling, and some true heroes and villains that can arise. So thank you all so much for listening and watching this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on the Kryalus Crystals. I would love to read them. For me personally, I love the idea of just taking the power of the heavens, from astromancy, and then their arcane wizards of a sort are able to then cast that at their enemies. It's just the coolest thing ever, but they're using this pseudo battery powered thing. I love it. Let me know what you think sounds awesome in the comments down below. And again, if you want to join in as this world is being developed and the game is being beta tested and learn about it on its way to launch and get some free STLs, check out the description down below. We'll hook you up. Thank you again, and happy wargaming.